8. Let's look at chapter 8. Now it came about in the 6th year, on the 5th day of the 6th month, I was sitting in my house with the elders of Judah sitting before me. And the hand of the Lord fell upon me there. And I looked, and behold, a likeness as the appearance of a man from his loins and downward. There was the appearance of fire from his loins, and upward the appearance of a great brightness, and the appearance of a glowing metal. And this was the day the earth stood still, and a guy came out. Gort Niktu Barada. Remember that? Okay, I know, I digress. 1947, gotta love that movie. Black and white. Thing opened up. He burned up all the tanks. Great movie, I love that movie. And he stretched out the form of a hand and caught me by the lock of my head. Come here. And the Spirit lifted me up between the earth and the heaven and brought me in the vision of God back to Jerusalem, to the entrance of the north gate of the inner court, where the seat of the idol of jealousy, which provoked to jealousy, was located. And behold, the glory of the Lord of Israel was there, like the appearance which I saw in the plain back in Babylon. Then he said to me, Son of man, raise your eyes now toward the north. So I raised my eyes toward the north, and behold, to the north of the altar gate was this idol of jealousy at the entrance. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they have done, and the great abomination which the house of Israel committed here? That I should be far from my sanctuary, but yet you will see still greater abominations than this. And he brought me to the entrance of the court. And when I looked, behold, there was a hole in the wall. And he said to me, Son of man, now dig through this wall. So I dug through the wall, and behold, an entrance. And he said to me, Go in and see the wicked abominations that have been committed here. So I entered and looked, and behold, every form of creeping thing and beast and detestable thing with all the idols was in the house of Israel. They were carved on the wall and all around. And standing in front of them were the 70 elders of the house of Israel, with Jazaniah the son of Shaphan standing amongst them. Each man had a censer in his hand, and the fragrant cloud of incense rising. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see what the elders of the house of Israel are doing and committing in the dark? Each man in the room of his carved image. For they say the Lord does not see us here. The Lord has forsaken his land. And he said to me, Yet you will still see greater abominations from this that they are committing. And he brought me into the entrance of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north. And behold, women were sitting there, weeping for Tammuz. And he said to me, Do you see this, son of man? Yet still greater abominations shall you see than these. And he brought me to the inner court of the Lord's house. And behold, at the entrance to the temple of the Lord God, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs to the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east. And they were prostrating themselves eastward toward the sun. And he said, Son of man, do you see this? Is it too light a thing for the house of Judah to commit such abominations which they have committed here? For they have filled the land with violence and provoked me repeatedly. For they are putting the twig to their nose. Therefore I shall indeed deal with them in my great wrath. My eye will have no pity upon them, nor shall I spare. Even though they cry in my ears with a loud voice, I shall not hear them. Ooh. What do you think about that?
Creepy.
You know, every time we study something, it's creepy. Crying out loud, God will be glad to tell him that you think half his Bible is creepy. Again, we are somewhat apocalyptic in the sense that, Babylon's way over here. And this is the Persian Gulf and the Tigris and Euphrates River. And then you have the Fertile Crescent all the way around over here. And then you got little Sea of Galilee, and Jerusalem's about right here. So God takes Ezekiel, obviously shows up to him and transports him back to Jerusalem at the time when all of this was going on. Took him back in time and space to this place here and said, I want you to see for yourself what these people did. And what they did was they desecrated, obviously, the temple. If you remember the temple, it was basically a rectangle with two rooms. This first room was the entrance of the court, and had the menorah on it on one side, the 7-candle menorah, and that was real big and all that stuff, and unto the Lord. And on this wall was the table of showbread. And this is where the Eucharist, or they didn't call it Eucharist, but where the bread was offered to the Lord. And this was sacred bread. That's what David raided when he got hungry. Him and his soldiers busted in the temple and stole all the bread so they could eat, because the soldiers were trying to starve them to death. And God said, well, God kind of told him to do that, so because I know where there's lots of bread. So him and his boys busted in. Over here was a giant laver of water for ceremonial cleansing and that stuff. And over here was your incense and perfumes and all that stuff that would be burning to the Lord if you wanted to do that, if they were going to offer that kind of offering, depending on why they were in there in the first place. In the second room here, which nobody was allowed to go in except the high priest, and that was one day a year on Yom Kippur, was first and foremost an altar, and upon the altar was the great the Ark of the Covenant that Indiana Jones found and took from God and put it in a warehouse somewhere in Washington, D.C. And this was literally, as refers to it there, the home of God. And I got news for you. God does not like solicitors. You cannot just walk in here anytime you want, lest you die. And he makes that quite plain. One day a year, the high priest, they had another huge altar out here with a raging fire, and another huge water laver over here. So the people would come. This was the court, the outer court. And the people would, by the tens of thousands, would be around the outer court. And this was actually the temple wall. You know, they talk about the Wailing Wall and all that. Well, the western wall is what remains today, and it's a piece of this wall down here of the outer court of the temple. You know, just a little piece like that. They're not really sure where everything else was any longer. But the people would come, by the millions, and they would offer their sheep or whatever, and they would slay it, and then roast the fatted parts, because the Lord said, I want all the fatted parts. Throw that on there, and the meat you offer to the priests and the Lord. And then they'd wash it, they'd collect the blood and wash it, and then they'd take all that, and the guy would prepare it in here, and eventually when it was time, he'd come in, and on the altar is underneath the ark, there was 4 horns on each corner of the altar. And the 4 horns represented the whole of the earth, the east, north, south, and west, you see, and the whole of the earth. And he would come and rub blood on all 4 horns, and then make his prayer for forgiveness of their sins, and then God would grant him absolution, and he would leave. And he was in there all of about maybe 10 minutes at the most, one day a year. And that was it. Anyone else goes in there, you're done. In fact, they were so worried about the priest, screwing up or something, and God getting angry with him, they used to tie a rope around the high priest when he went in. Because if he did screw up and died in there, or God struck him down, No one else would be able to go in and get it. So he would lay there for a year and rot, and that would be nasty. So they used to tie a rope around him in case he did screw up and God struck him down, then they could at least pull the body back out and get rid of it. Left a new high priest. Believe it or not, that's what they did. That was a custom. So this is where we are. This is the setting. Now read that chapter again and you'll understand why God's a little miffed. Problem is, these people got rid of this and set up a huge golden idol here, to whatever reason. That's the statue of abomination he's talking about. At the door of my holy sacred temple, my holy sacred place, they got a stupid idol out here that, God happened to say in the Ten Commandments, I am the one God, the Lord thy God. I shall have no graven images made whatsoever, anywhere, anytime, ever. So they bring a big old hunker and put it up right at the front door of the temple. Boy, there's a good idea. That was the first thing. The second thing is, then we go into this outer courtroom, and what do they see in there? They see all these guys burning incense and all this stuff to the other gods. They've got all the other gods. This is gone. They've got all the other gods now carved onto the walls. And they're all turned toward them, worshiping them. Well, there's a good idea. And then they go in here, and what do they see? Well, first of all, this is gone. They've gotten rid of that. And they also are in here burning everything, bunches of them, to the east, which would be that way, to Mecca. And the Philistines, God and Allah and all that nonsense. Well, Allah really didn't exist then yet. They just called it Asherah or Dagon, those guys. And they're worshiping out in God's home to the other gods, the Baals, if you will, the fake gods of the day. And the Lord's a little miffed about that. So he's saying, this is what they've done to the holiest spot on the planet. The holiest spot on the earth. The one piece of property which isn't any much... By the way, this courtroom, probably no bigger than this classroom. And this one here, no bigger than, again, if you had two of these classrooms next to each other, with a little curtain over here, a little doorway, that would be the whole of the tabernacle of Jerusalem. Now, this court was huge out here, and when you look at the great edifices, that's what you're looking at. But the tabernacle itself was not that big a deal. It was very small, very condensed, and the reason was because there's only one guy going in there. You didn't need a huge tabernacle. There was no glass or steel kind of construction like these mega churches. It was very small, at best this large, and most of this room was taken up with a huge altar of showbread here and a giant menorah over there that lit the place up, and the lavers and the incense things. One guy would go in here and do all that, and then he'd go in here and do all this. And right here in the middle, you'd have this giant Ark of the Covenant. It's sticking out, and the poles sticking out and everything. And that was a pretty big piece of equipment, actually, measure-wise. So it sat in the middle of the room. Off to the side, there was two smaller altars that held incense censers, where they'd wave it around like that. But other than that, that's all that was in there. It was a big old Ark of the Covenant. So these guys went in there and desecrated the place. Not just the outer court, that would have been bad enough. Not just this, that's bad enough. But to go into the Holy of Holies, where God himself says, that's my home, you got some nerve. When does man become so presumptuous that he doesn't need God or doesn't have to follow God? Well, Adam and Eve tried that. Didn't work out. Didn't end up very well for him. Throughout history, man has done that over and over and again to God. 3 times, the chosen race of Israel was destroyed. 3 times. And you got to ask yourself, a truly enlightened individual, Einstein put this question forward when they all said, well, he's a scientist, he doesn't believe in God. His response was, on the contrary. The more I look into science, into the universe, into the mathematics of how everything on this planet and all the planets and stars work, I guarantee you, the more I do see God, the more I believe in God. What I don't understand isn't how the planets and everything works. What I don't understand is how one set of people, one nation of people, can let themselves be utterly destroyed. 3, and if you include after Jesus, when the Romans wasted the place, how one set of humans, one race, can let themselves be destroyed by the same God 4 times. How is that possible? That's what I don't understand, says Einstein. Not how the universe works. That I got figured out. But how can the same people, not different peoples, the same people, same history, same traditions, how can they let themselves be stupid 4 times? That's where we get the famous definition in that paper he wrote. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. That's Einstein's famous quote, if you've ever heard that before. He wrote it in that same paper when he said that. What I don't understand is how 4 generations of people can let themselves be destroyed for the same reason, in the same place, the same land, and expect a different result somehow. That's insanity. That's what I don't understand. Science, piece of cake. Time travel, piece of cake. I got that all figured out. This boggles the human mind. Well, folks, where's America in all of this? You know? I'll tell you where it is. I think we're in here carving idols on the wall. And those idols kind of look in the shape, they're not like cow gods anymore, or dog gods, or all the Egyptian gods, or the Greek gods, or any of the other gods. But they are gods like money, power, possession. You know, those kind of gods. Envy, strife, slander. And you know, in here, where the Americans are, they're not turned to the east, they're turned to themselves. They're looking at themselves, bowing down before themselves. Aren't I great? Look what I've done. Look what I've accomplished. Look at all my degrees on the wall. I hate it when ministers do that. Every minister's office I've ever walked into, they got 1,000 degrees and plaques and all the awards that they've been given because they're so wonderful and the earth can't do without them. You ever been in a pastor's office like that? I've been in plenty of them. And I ask him, I'd say, Kevin, what do you put all that junk up on the wall for? Who are you trying to impress? You or the Lord? Because God knows about all this junk and He really doesn't care much. I have 1 degree on my wall, if you've ever been to my office. I am a proud graduate of the Little People's Academy. 4 years old, buddy. I made it through. I got beat up a few times. I peed myself plenty of times. But I graduated. And on my wall, from 1957 or whatever, you will see my degree from the Little People's Academy. People say, where are your credentials? I go, right there, man. Look at it and know it. Now, somewhere in the attic, I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Florida, a master's degree from Asbury Theological Seminary, and a PhD doctorate one from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. Somewhere. But in all honesty, folks, really, let's keep the whole world in perspective under the hand of God. Does all that really matter? Little People's Academy, that's what's important. I was born and I was set on a mission. Ta-dum. And I laughed and I giggled and I cried when Mom went away, and I peed myself about every day, and I was proud. 3 years old, couldn't be stopped. But we don't remember those days, do we? When we were totally dependent upon everybody in the whole world. See, now we got all our degrees and our diplomas, and now I turn to myself and say, I am wonderful. I'm more wonderful than anybody else. And if God doesn't know it, I'll make sure His people know it. I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not have any other gods before me. First law, first rule out of his mouth. 4 generations totally destroyed because they couldn't even remember that. I hate to belabor the point, but God destroyed His own chosen people 4 times for getting in His face and blowing Him off. What makes us think He won't do that today? Yes.
What I want to know is who's the brave person that stepped through those curtains first to do that?
You know, arrogance knows no limit whatsoever. Arrogance knows no limit whatsoever. Evident. Look at the people reacting in this storm, in the lines, in the stores. You know, give me that look, because I'm bigger than you. Whoa, ooh, there's law right there. That's like the Old West. You know, fastest gun wins, biggest sword in the Roman days. Might does not make right. You see, that's what we've blurred here in America. First of all, what is right? And who's allowed to wield it? You see, what is right? We've lost our Christocentric focus. We've lost our moral center, we call it. You know, we got all kinds of cute little names for it. But the fact of the matter is, we ain't got it. So why even bother to try and define it? It's not there anymore. You know what's right? I'll tell you what's right. What's right is what I think is right. And that's the problem with our press. You know, it doesn't have to have actually happened, but if I think it happened, then it happened. And we can slander and smear and destroy anybody we want simply because I think so. I think it's, you know, whatever. That's the problem with our press. That's the problem with our people. That's the problem with our government. That's the problem with our nation. You know where this comes from? It's not new, by the way. The worst verse in the whole Bible. Worst verse in the whole Bible. Right. Each one did what was right in their own eyes. Worst verse in the Bible. Each one did what was right in their own eyes. And God showed up and literally all heaven broke loose. This comes out of the book of Judges. 12 times. 12. Again, 4 generations wasted. 12 cycles. The people were here, all holy and squeezy and squishy before the Lord. And then they decided, well, this Lord stuff is just getting to be too much trouble. I don't want to go to church. I got tickets to Disney World. And then they went down here and they actually decided and did that. And they blew God off. And then God had to drop the hammer on them. Smashed them. Once they were all smashed, they cried out and said, oh God, we're sorry, we didn't know, we didn't realize what we're doing, blah, 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 blah. And the Lord raised up a judge to come and save them. All the great judges you read about, Samson, you know. and all those guys. And the judge got them all back right and squishy with God again, and then same thing. 12 times. And every time is preceded by and post-seated by this verse. Each one did what was right in his own eyes. Folks, we don't worship Dagon anymore. We don't worship Asherah anymore. We don't worship Hezrah anymore, or any of those other ancient gods. But what we do worship is ourselves. And you know what? Be very careful with that. Now, I'm not speaking against you going out and accomplishing great things. To God be the glory. I'm not speaking against you being the best of whatever it is you do, be it an athlete or a homemaker or whatever. Yes, be the best. Praise be and glory to God, not yourself. I know you make the best apple pie, but you don't have to remind, what's-her-face, Evelyn, that she doesn't know how to bake. You see what I'm saying? What you need to do is bake one of those wonderful pies and give it to Evelyn on a daily basis so she can eat lots of pie. And glory be given to God for you for making them pies. I mean, that's how you look at the world. But the day you stand up and say, well, I'm the best pie maker in the world, they should be glad to have me. Well, now you're on some bad ground. Be careful. Have I ever won a degree? Yes, I have. It's from the Little People's Academy. 3 years old. I had nothing to do with it. It was all my mom dragging me to this stupid daycare. The Greeks had a name for this. They called it narcissism. They worshiped themselves. In fact, they created a god, Narcissus, which, he looked into the water one day. You remember the story? Everybody read Greek mythology ever? He looked into the pool of water to get a drink, and he saw himself. And he said, the guy's name was Adonis. And he looked in, and he saw himself, and he was so beautiful. And he just said, I am the greatest, most lovely. I'm more lovely. This was his downfall. I am more beautiful and handsome and lovely than the gods themselves. Ooh, man, you are about to have a bad day. And of course, Zeus heard that. And Hera heard that, his wife. And Aphrodite heard that, the goddess of beauty. And they came down and blasted him and turned him into an ugly, horrible, hideous monster with one eye, the Cyclops and all that. And eventually Hercules would kill him. But the lesson was the same. Boy, am I something. I'm more beautiful than the gods. Boom! You're done. We built a ship that God himself couldn't sink. One ice cube. Bam! Down she went. The Hindenburg, same thing. This is the biggest, strongest airship ever. God couldn't even knock it out of the sky. What, are you trying to make him, challenge him? One lightning bolt. Be careful. It's not always convenient to have to go to church. It's not always convenient to give to the Lord. It's not always convenient. I mean, if it were, then everybody would do it. There would be nothing to being a Christian. But when you have to make that sacrifice of time or talent or money or whatever, and you do it cheerfully, wantingly, then that becomes an offering worthy of the Lord. Again, to God be the glory and praise. But if you do it begrudgingly, then my suggestion to you is don't do it at all. Because you're just aggravating God more. Malachi is all about that. God even says, I wish one of you were smart enough not even to do it, not even make the offering. Just go away. Live your life and die. But don't come here under this stupid pretense that you're doing me a favor. Psalm is quite set. He says, before the rising of the sun, creation of the earth, and well after the setting of the sun, the destruction of the earth, my name and presence shall be great. In other words, I don't need you. You need me. The day you forget that is the day you damn yourself to a life of misery. And all those degrees on the wall, just like in Revelation 19, when you stand before the Lord with all your degrees and all your accomplishments and all your riches, there'll be a dead silence in all of heaven for 30 minutes, upon which all of that will vanish, will disappear. And you'll be standing there looking like an idiot. And the Lord will ask you, now what? And then they will bring out those books. Oh, those books. The books of the deeds. And then they'll bring out the holy book, which only Jesus can open. Little monster. And if your name is not found there, it is found over here in the books of the deeds. Things are going to get... You thought you've had a bad day? Not yet. Now, folks, I didn't write that. I'm simply telling you what it says throughout all of the Old Testament, throughout the New Testament. You know, there's a reason Paul writes, when you make an offering to God, be cheerful about it. You know, like what you're doing. You come to church and sacrifice your time, like what you're doing. Be glad you're there. If you come to a dinner or whatever, bring something. Help out. If you come to the offering, put your money in, but don't do it begrudgingly. God hates that. But He loves the cheerful giver. Look how Jesus honored the woman who only had a penny or two, but she snuck in, pushed past all the priests and everything, and threw her coins in and snuck out. And Jesus has immortalized her forever in the Word of God. About the woman giving the 2 pence or whatever to the coffers. By no means is that in any way, shape, or form significant to the temple. Financially. But it's totally significant to the Lord. Because she gave out of her poverty, not out of her abundance. It's easy to give when you're a zillionaire. Well, I'll throw in a few bucks. That's not a sacrifice. But when you give of what you got and you stay faithful to it and you do it cheerfully. That's what Paul said. God loves the cheerful giver, not the begrudging giver. Oh, I got to write another check from church. I don't know why we pay Chandler every week, just so we can tell those stupid stories. Listen, do me a favor. Don't give. Don't give. You're not doing me any favors. You're not doing yourself any favors. And I can guarantee you, God's not happy about it. So folks, as old as this chapter is, God took Ezekiel from Babylon back in time and space to a place that was His most sacred and worshipped spot and showed him the arrogance of the human individual. Now, you don't get like that overnight. You don't wake up saying, I'm going to be the best superstar in the world. Nobody else is going to matter but me. But slowly but surely over the years, degree after degree, you start getting it in your brain that you're indispensable. Slowly but surely, you miss one church, then you miss another couple of churches. And I'm not talking about a vacation where you're out of state or out of country. But just don't go because you're tired. The yard needs to be mowed. I got weevils in my dog food. Craziest excuses I've ever heard. And then it gets easier and easier to blow God off, to miss that, to not make that effort. Easier and easier. And you don't realize you're on a tiny little rubber floaty raft pushing yourself farther and farther away from the shore, out into the ocean, which is full of big old giant great white sharks. And I guarantee you, when you get out there and those sharks are about to attack, you'll be the first one to scream to God. And God's going to say, why don't you stay on the land, you idiot? Now, on behalf of God and in fairness of divine mercy, He sometimes sends a boat and picks you up and brings you back. But how long is it before you're back on that stupid little raft, pushing yourself out to sea? Again. And again. And again. Until what? He gets tired of it. And says, that's enough. You ever been mowing the yard on a hot summer's day in Florida when you're all sweaty and nasty, or weeding in the garden or whatever, and those little gnats, and they get in your nose and they get in your ears and you hear them, and you swat them away, and they're right back again, you swat them away, and that's what we do to God. We are the gnats. If you want a trick for that, wet your hand with water. Then you don't even have to hit them, just bump them and their wings stick to you. There you go. Now you're mine, little gnat. Gnat goo. Well, that's what God will do to us eventually if we keep buzzing in His ear. Hate to be gross, but that's what's happened to Jerusalem. Look outside the walls and tell me what you see. 187,000 bloodthirsty warriors ready to descend upon this little town. And it was no more. Four times. I agree with Albert Einstein. The mathematics of the universe, we can figure that out. But how the same people, the same place, the same God can allow 4 generations to be destroyed? That's insanity. So be careful the next time you think, well, God's not that important. He won't mind. I think He might. Okay. Remember, Ezekiel's got to go and teach the people what the heck they did wrong. So God's got to teach Ezekiel what the heck they did wrong. Or else He'll have nothing to tell these people. He can't go in there and lord himself up and say, well, I'll tell you why y'all screwed up. He's got to know and he's got to see. So this book is somewhat apocalyptic in that it transcends time. Ezekiel's here, and then he's back here, and then he's back here, and he's transcending, 100 years or 70 years of time to get these people ready who were once young men and women, now grown adults, to come back and try this one more time. And they would do okay for about 414 years until Mr. Rome shows up. And by then they had moved so far away from God again, even God Himself, Jesus, says to His boys, you're impressed with this temple, aren't you? When they were all looking at it, behold that golden, wonderful temple. And God Himself, nobody catches this in the gospel, but Jesus says, truly I tell you, the day is already here, where not one stone shall be set upon another. It would be utterly destroyed. Wow. I think they missed that. And 30 years after Jesus resurrected, went back to heaven, roughly 30 years, maybe 28, 27, what happened? Jerusalem was laid to siege, the temple was destroyed, and not one stone, they burned it to where not one stone rests upon another. And they chased the remnant, the escapees, all the way to Tzara, where they besieged them 3 years. And they would have killed all of them, but they killed themselves first. And for the 4th time, an entire generation was destroyed. Think about that. Next time, you don't feel like going to church or Sunday school or praying or anything.